Today, we're going to be talking about how your digestion might be impacting your sleep.
What's up and welcome to Sam Miller Science, where you're joining me just over a decade into my personal journey of working to bridge the gap between metabolism, macros, muscle, and medicine, all while helping coaches scale the impact that they desire and deserve. If you are here, thank you so much for listening and for trusting me to help you elevate your coaching game or to lead you in your transformation to realize your true potential. In either case, each week I'll be sharing my methods, models, and message to serve as leverage for your specific goals. Without further ado, let's get on to today's show.
So believe it or not, there is a causal relationship between dysbiosis, which is basically an overgrowth of bacteria in the gut, and the quality of your sleep. And so what we tend to see is there's actually changes in both directions. So as our sleep worsens, we see bacterial overgrowth. And as we have poor sleep, or as we have that bacterial overgrowth, it's going to make the sleep even worse. So it's something that makes sense on a surface level, but inside today's episode, we're going to dive in to a little bit on why it happens, a recent piece of research that really helps to illustrate this. And then on top of that, we'll also talk a little bit about what to do about it and some of the things that I teach on in terms of my other gut health content pieces. So if you're new here to my platform, gut health is something that we've talked about quite frequently in terms of your overall microbiome and its importance. I've done a 4-part gut health series in 2022 that's on the audio version on my podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You'll also find episodes related to digestion and common irritants, information about different nutritional styles that may help you improve your digestion and gut health, and so much more. So inside today's episode, we're going to jump in first and foremost by talking about how you may be experiencing poor sleep and insomnia, even if you have pretty good sleep hygiene practices. So even if you have a regular nighttime routine, even if you get morning sun exposure, these are things that are very popular in the health and wellness space and even biohacking space, doing different things to help enhance your sleep. So if you're not doing it already, we want to make sure we're in a cold, dark room. We want daytime light exposure. Ideally, we do want some exercise during the day, but not too close to sleep. We also want to structure our nutrition or our dietary intake in a way that is supportive of our sleep, and having well-regulated blood sugar can go a long way in helping with this. But what happens if you're doing all of these things and you still can't necessarily get the sleep that you desire, or you notice that you're having a lot of nighttime wake-ups, or just overall your sleep across the week is poor? And this is where dysbiosis could be part of the equation. So a causal link was found in a particular 2023 study from Lee et al. Now it's spelled L-I, not L-E-E. So if you do want to check out this study, it's a 2023 study from Lee et al. And they found a causal link between dysbiosis and insomnia. And it's really interesting how there's this relationship here. Now, if you're interested in seeing other health-related factors that might be impacting your sleep, I do have an episode called 6 Overlooked Factors Affecting Sleep and Health, and that's in episode 284 in the audio feed of my Sam Miller Science podcast. So let's break down the study. This is not a randomized controlled trial, but it is still pretty good human evidence. It is a form of epidemiological analysis that's known as a Mendelian randomization technique that can get much closer to identifying causal links. So even though it's not an RCT, it's still pretty good. Ideally, we love to have things like systematic reviews or reviews of the literature. Those things tend to be like analysis of multiple randomized controlled trials, which is the best strength of evidence when looking at what to do from the perspective of how you might adjust something in your life based on human trials. But we don't always have that at our disposal. So sometimes we have to make do with other information, and we can extract information and then begin to make informed choices about our own health. So using this technique, researchers were able to identify links in both directions, meaning sleep impacting gut health and gut health impacting sleep, which makes sense, right? They seem like two very important things when it comes to our overall health and wellness. They identified a microbiome signature that leads to insomnia, and I'm going to give you more on that microbiome signature in a little bit. They also further identified which type of dysbiosis might result from insomnia as well, meaning, okay, so we're missing out on sleep. What's actually happening in terms of the gut bacteria or that microbiome signature after the fact? So mainly today, the main focus is what happens in terms of dysbiosis impacting sleep, but we will talk just a little bit in terms of some of the bacterial markers of interest and why we want to pay attention to those. So what did they find inside this epidemiological study? What they found was 10 specific bacterial populations that raised the risk or they lead to insomnia. So remember, it's kind of hard to have that direct cause and effect relationship, but there's definitely a strong relationship here that raise the risk of insomnia, and 6 populations that may negatively change as a result of insomnia. So that's 10 bacterial populations that raise the risk or lead to insomnia. And then we have 6 populations of bacteria that change negatively as a result of that poor sleep. So we're not going to go over every single one, but I am going to call out specific bacteria and bacterial markers of interest. This is something where you are probably not going to see this unless you've had some sort of PCR gut testing done, or a more specific GI analysis. This is usually not present in just like a normal stool sample, and probably not something you are going to talk about with your gastroenterologist on a regular basis. So this one, understand that this picture can get a little bit more complicated, and really we still need to look at the lifestyle factors because those are the things that are driving a lot of the changes in terms of the gut signature. The first bacterial marker of interest that we're going to talk about today is an overgrowth of bacteria called Prevotella. Now, there is some nuance when we're talking about gut bacteria because Prevotella, in some ways, certain species of Prevotella can be associated with health. However, other species of Prevotella, if we have an overgrowth there, can be associated with metabolic syndrome or even things like gum disease or periodontal disease. Just know this, in general, an overgrowth or too much Prevotella generally means that the unhealthy species have overgrown. Now, we have to think, what factors can potentially lead to Prevotella overgrowth? So previous research from Wu et al. In 2019 shows that small intestinal bacterial overgrowths can contribute to this overgrowth that we're seeing in Prevotella. And other things that play into this might be something like low stomach acid. So we know that slow motility and low stomach acid increase those risk factors for developing small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Now, these are often driven by lifestyle factors such as chronic stress, chronic undereating, micronutrient deficiencies, being sedentary, consuming a lower fiber diet, having a poor quality baseline nutrient intake. All of those things will play into it. So at running the gamut from things like micronutrients, macronutrients, calorie intake, quality of the foods, the ingredients of those foods, your movement, your stress levels directly have a relationship with stomach acid and depleting key micronutrients. So all of these things are connected. And then really, even if you have your stress somewhat managed to where maybe it's not showing up in terms of your training or something like that, or you find that training is helping you with that, this is where some people don't realize if it spills over into sleep, we end up in this vicious cycle because it impacts your gut health. And then your gut health is leading to more systemic stress or overall body burden that you're experiencing as well. So the next one besides Prevotella that we're going to talk about is Lachnoclostridium. Now, this particular genus is almost always associated with negative health outcomes. Currently, we only have basically one high-level piece of research or one high-level research paper that's showing that this basically tends to overgrow if we're eating a standard American diet pattern. So this is basically Western food intake when we have multi-ingredient, hyperpalatable, hypercaloric, low micronutrient density foods. And typically we see lower fiber intake, lower polyphenols, sometimes lower protein intake as well, just kind of depending on where you are in the world, and especially in the United States, even people who are eating protein, sometimes it's not always the best quality sources of protein, or it's very high in calories and also dietary fat. Additionally, I'm not against dietary fat, but sometimes people will be consuming choices in addition to already having like 2,500 calories from a drive-through, and then they're adding that on top, and we're still running into an overall issue of energy balance as well as food quality. The reasons I'm not going to dive into specific other names aside from Prevotella and Lachnoclostridium is just because they're almost all associated with aspects of poor lifestyle and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we basically understand that there are certain species of bacteria that we need to pay attention to. Rather than majoring in the minors, we need to focus on the big rocks that are going to shift that microbiome signature in our favor. Now, there are some things that you can do as you have a more specialized understanding in gut health, where you can look at sort of different bacterial markers of interest and understand how it may be related to someone's lifestyle and how it may be related to their diet, their supplements, and their training. That's something that's going to be a little bit more advanced and more along the lines of what I cover in my nutrition and metabolism specialization program inside Metabolism School. So first and foremost, one thing I want to cover is why this dysbiosis and insomnia might be happening, and then we'll kind of continue to break things down inside today's episode. So A few reasons in terms of the why behind dysbiosis and insomnia. The microbiome can be considered our second genome, and genomes ultimately produce molecules that facilitate or are detrimental to our health. Our microbiome also produces tons of different substances that can affect our health positively or negatively as well. So things like short-chain fatty acids, for example. The first way that something like Prevotella may be increasing insomnia is directly through inflammation through something called toll-like receptor 4 or TLR4. Now, if we have this activation of toll-like receptor 4, increasing inflammation may seem to lead to poor sleep outcomes, basically creating a source or potential reason or root cause for that insomnia. Another way is through the molecules or the species that produce or potentially what they're not producing as well. So in a healthy gut, we have these beneficial things being produced, almost like if you're not as familiar with gut health, but you're familiar with the difference between muscle tissue and fat tissue, muscle tissue gives off very different chemical messages than fat. Fat actually releases sort of inherently inflammatory signals, whereas muscle does not. If you're less familiar with the gut, understand that a healthy gut is going to lead to different sort of signals and messages than an unhealthy one. And it's also a healthy gut is going to help with your immune system and modulating inflammation. An unhealthy gut may be kind of a runaway freight train in the opposite direction. So when we look at this, understand molecules that species produce or potentially what they're not producing is playing a role here. So some strains can produce wake-promoting chemicals such as glutamate and histamine. So there are things called mast cells that can actually perpetuate some of these histamine issues that people have. Glutamate is also more of a wake-promoting chemical, so that would not be a good thing if you were trying to sleep. So we need to be very conscious of how this state of gut health is impacting signaling across the body. A lack of positive bacteria, such as lactobacillus, can also lower our body's ability to produce GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid. Now, this is further corroborated by other research studies that show improvements in sleep in some people with the use of multi-strain lacto-bifido probiotic blends. So let's talk about what we can do about this and a little conclusion and wrap up for today's episode. We never want to make the science seem like fear-mongering because there's definitely things we can do in our daily life. There's movement, nutrition, lifestyle medicine related practices that can really help us get a handle on all of these issues. So the first step would be to fix any sort of gut symptoms you have going on, which often starts with your nutrition, with your overall lifestyle, stress management, potentially incorporating some evidence-based supplementation. I do have a number of gut health episodes, as I mentioned, ranging from covering basic definitions of dysbiosis, intestinal permeability, learning about low enzyme secretion, low stomach acid, also understanding a little bit more on motility and certain diets that may play into someone's overall gut health. So there's a lot of content in my audio feed if you want to check that out. We're obviously adding videos very frequently, so there will be more on gut health in the future, but for now, that's probably the best source of that information if you want to check that out. And if you're looking for more in-depth education, obviously my team and I do provide that as well. The first things to do once we move through just kind of a basic understanding of like, okay, we're not following a standard American diet. We are trying to optimize our sleep. We are trying to get adequate movement. We're resistance training, but not too much to where it's exacerbating our gut health. Then what we have to do is kind of go through the basics of digestion. And so when we go through the basics of digestion and someone's struggling with their gut health, we may remove common irritants. We're probably going to look to manage stress, probably going to do a quick spot check of things like fiber intake, practices related to motility and movement. All of these things play into someone's gut health. We may want to see if the person has any symptoms of low stomach acid, like early fullness at a meal. All of these things are going to play into whether or not someone may be experiencing gut dysbiosis or not. Now, once we go through the basics, now remember this episode was kind of framed as, hey, you're already doing the basics and you're struggling with your sleep. But a lot of people, again, who are watching this or listening to this may not have every single one of those dialed in. So we need to have at least 3 to 4 months of mastering those basics to see if we've improved sleep. And remember, some people miss the low-hanging fruit of the nighttime routine, cool, dark room, making sure if you have blackout curtains or wear an eye mask, minimizing noise, except for if you enjoy something like white noise. Obviously, that could be helpful as well. Body temperature is big, not working out too close to bedtime, not consuming caffeine too close to bedtime. Some people have maybe 80% of those, but they're missing 20%. That would really go a long way to improving their sleep. So let's make sure we're doing that first. Then in terms of gut symptoms, we're going to manage that through nutrition, exercise, and supplementation. Don't just jump on taking random supplements. Please check out some of my other episodes around gut health, nutrition, and supplementation before you go and just randomly grab some probiotic at the store. We want to make sure we know what we're looking for there. If you're still having digestive symptoms after mastering the basics and you have that nighttime routine in place and you're still struggling with your sleep, the next thing we're going to do is go through a methodical system of elimination. Now, the other podcast episodes that we need to pay attention to here, again, that 4-part gut health series, which was recorded in March of 2022. I've also had some episodes on educating folks on a Mediterranean style diet, the lower FODMAP approach for people who are struggling with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Remember, this is not a long-term thing. You should not be following these diet styles as the be-all, end-all, doing this forever. It's the only way you ever eat. Sometimes it's just for symptom relief in the short term, and it's best to work with a health professional, coach of some kind, who kind of walk you through that process instead of just aimlessly choosing some of these nutritional strategies on your own. If you're someone who likes to go hard in the paint with your exercise, make sure you dial back. You should not be, this is not a no days off time. If you're struggling with gut dysbiosis and digestive issues, it is not a time to be doing 2-a-days. It's not a time to be hitting it hard with high levels of rated perceived exertion or low levels of reps in reserve. We really want to make sure that we have training to maintain our muscle mass and still support our body composition goals, but we're not doing it in a way that's detrimental to our recovery. Remember, improving your gut, helping to recover the status of your gut does require a bit of modulation in training intensity overall. Now, if you're looking for a much more in-depth understanding of this, diving into understanding more specific bacterial markers based on research and understanding where the evidence kind of lies with that, tailoring more specific nutritional strategies for clients to help them address some of these biofeedback concerns and quality of life complaints, you're definitely going to want to check out the nutrition and metabolism specialization for coaches. This takes more of a 360 approach to client transformation, where we can basically dive into these different areas, use certain lifestyle medicine practices, use evidence-based supplementation, and rather than just only focusing on one of these things, we're using them in conjunction with one another to drive better client outcomes and better results overall. You can learn more about that at metabolismschool.com. As far as today's episode, main takeaway, we understand that when we have poor sleep, that can drive dysbiosis, but dysbiosis also seems to perpetuate a state of insomnia. 2 bacterial strands or markers of interest that we mentioned today, we're looking at Prevotella, and we also talked a little bit about Lachnoclostridium. There are other strains of bacteria that you could potentially look at or pay attention to, but rather than having a super redundant podcast episode saying, hey, all of these are related to your lifestyle, hey, all of these are related to your nutrition, these are all related to, low fiber intake or something like that, we really are just getting to the point that, okay, this exists. There's some evidence to support it as far as human research goes. And what do we need to do about it from a practical low-hanging fruit perspective in our daily lives? So I hope this was helpful for you, understanding the relationship between the microbiome and sleep. It is also covered in episode 284 of 6 potential reasons related to your health that could be leading to sleep loss or poor sleep. So definitely check that out if you're someone who does struggle with your sleep. Those other 5 reasons might be a great way for you to get a handle on things and improve your sleep and recovery overall. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on audio. If you are on the video version watching on YouTube, please give this a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. I believe there's still that little notification bell that you can hit if you're looking for more content like this. And also, if you are a fan or supporter of the work that I do, you can always screenshot these episodes, share them on social media. You can tag me. I'm at Sam Miller Science on just about every major social platform. And that goes a really long way to supporting the work that my team and I do here, research that we put in for these shows, the content and production. This is something that we do to primarily spread better quality education related to health, nutrition, and transformation. And so if that resonates with you, help us kind of spread the word, bring us a friend, whether that's one-on-one or you choose to share publicly. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and I will talk to you in the next one.